Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you how to run basic SQL scripts in MySQL Workbench. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. If you don't already have MySQL running, I need to open up the control panel, stop and start it. What do you need to do? I like to keep it stopped unless I'm running it just to keep the battery usage down to a minimum. All right, so once you get it started, you'll end up on the home page like this of Workbench, click on local instance and it'll open up, you'll end up in something like this. Um, so I've already run this script, so we'll walk through what it does and we'll actually go ahead and execute it together. All right, so the first thing I have here is create schema. I'm just calling it class demos. This is creating a database inside MySQL for us. So actually create tables inside of it. This is just the first part of our structure. Now I'm going to create 3 tables. I've got, 4 tables, I think, actually. So we've got animal. It's going to be our base class, base table for animals. We've got an animal ID. We're going to make that the primary key. So this is the syntax for that. So I'm declaring animal ID as an integer. And I'm giving each animal a name and a type. And I'm using a varchar, or a variable length character, is what that means. So the nice thing about that is that the database will allocate up to 20 characters for it, but if I'm only using 3, it only uses 3 characters in the database. So it's a way of saving some space inside the database. I'm creating a table named environment. I've got an environment ID, environment name, environment location. Again, I've got an integer for the ID. I'm making that the primary key. And then each of these is 20 characters as well. Those are just numbers I just randomly chose, so it's not that 20 means anything in specific. All right, so then I created 2 specific types of animals. I've got a mammal class and a reptile class. So again, I'm using animal ID as my primary key in this table. So it's a primary key, also defining it as a foreign key. So it's a foreign key that's referencing the animal table and the animal ID primary key in that table. I could use a different name for that key in this table, but it seems to be a lot easier to follow if we keep that key, that primary key, foreign key, with the same name. Creating a mammal species, again, it's a varchar. I also created a mammal environment ID, and that's an integer. And this is also a foreign key back to that environment table, just so I can find out information about the environment. So I've got environment name, environment location. So I've got that there. Mammal, or the reptile table, is pretty much the exact same. We have species in there. We have the environment ID, animal ID. We also have what we call reptile regrow appendage. As you know, some reptiles can regrow their appendages if they lose one. Usually it's a tail. So I've got that in there as well. So I've got the primary key, foreign key with a reference, another foreign key with a reference. So these tables are just creating, or these statements just creating my tables. So at the end of every statement, I put a semicolon. And what that allows me to do is I can grab all these statements at once and execute them as one block. So it's a one SQL script and it goes through and runs each one. All right, so once we've done that, and I'll show you running those, we'll run insert statements to insert values into the tables. So I've got an insert into, so that's the syntax, we use that. I'm telling it which fields or which attributes I'm going to put these values in. This is useful if you've got a table with 50 columns, 20 columns, like that. You're going to put in values in 2 or 3 columns. You can use this syntax, so you can just insert into those individual columns. All right, so I'm giving each one an ID. These would be a surrogate key, and I'm just picking those myself. I'm not requesting database to do this on my behalf. So I'm creating a tiger, which is a mammal, bearded dragon, which is a reptile, lion mammal, fox mammal, skink is a reptile. Then I'm creating 4 environments. Again, my environment ID, giving it a name, and then a location. I just picked pretty much locations are random. Don't know if they're accurate or not. All right, and then we have our animals. So I'm going to insert 3 animals. So this is the animal ID, this is a species, and this is the environment that it lives in. So I've got 2 cats and a dog species in here. And inside reptile, I've got animal IDs 2 and 5. So 2 is a bearded dragon, 5 is a skink. So you can see that relationship there, 1, 3, and 4, 1, 3, and 4. All right. And then I did some basic researching and found some species of lizards, or reptiles anyway. These are the environment IDs. And then this represents which appendage the reptile can regrow. I put tail and I picked null. I really can't tell you if those animals can regrow appendages or not, but just for example. I've got here some select statements so you can actually see the results of the tables. And then I've got an additional couple inserts here that will fail. We'll actually walk through that here in just a moment. And we've got some queries. We'll talk about those in a little bit as well. So first, we will go ahead and run this. Now, I've already created a schema. I've already run these scripts previously. So I can either click on class demos and drop schema, or I can just run this command here. Either way is fine. I'll just show doing it from here, drop schema. It's going to ask me if I want to review the SQL. If you do SQL, see it's doing that same drop I just showed you. We'll execute. Now my schema is gone. So like I said, you can grab all these statements at once and execute them, or you can do them individually. It doesn't really matter, but I'll show you each one executing. What you can do is you can highlight the code you want to run, and you can do this if it's more than one SQL statement, or this is just do one statement at a time. So I've got this statement here that creates a schema, executing it. Doesn't show up in here right away, but you click the little refresh button, or you can right click refresh all, and you'll get your schema. There's no tables in it yet. So what we'll do here is I'll go ahead and I'll grab these 4 create table statements. I will click on this one, execute everything that's highlighted, and click on refresh again. And now I've got my tables. Click on the table, you can see the columns that it has, the indexes it has. It just has one of the primary key for right now. Foreign keys, nothing there, but if you go to mammal, foreign keys, you should see, and it automatically named those foreign keys for me. All right, so there's no data. That's not very interesting. So let's go ahead and add some data. All right, and so you'll see I've got all green down here, so that's good. You can keep track of that, and we'll see some red here in a minute. So I'm going to clear that out so we see that red pop up. All right, so I'll refresh this just to make sure. So we've got our tables, and so we can select the rows, and it shows us the results of that select. We'll see how to do that via code ourselves here. All right, so we've done that. So we can run these. I want to see what's in reptile. And there's what's in reptile. I can just click on it, click on the one, and it shows us that. So a couple of ways you can run the queries. All right, so here's an insert that will fail because the parent doesn't exist. So I'll highlight that, click execute, and see I get an error down here. Insert into this failed. Cannot update a child row. And you can copy the response just so you can see a little bit better. Cannot add or update a child row. A foreign key constraint exists. So we're violating that foreign key. So that's an error could you get for that one. And you'll get the same error, very similar anyway, when you try to run this one, because the environment ID doesn't exist. Actually, I've got a duplicate key, so that's right. I can't insert twice because I already have something with a 5. But if it did let me do that, I'd also get an error because the environment doesn't exist. I'm putting environment ID of 5, and there is no environment ID of 5. So that's why those two failed. I'll go ahead and clear these again. All right. So just so you can do different joins on tables. So we'll do this one first. So here I'm going to join all the animals with the mammal table. So what I want to do is I've got an animal table. It has an animal ID, animal name, animal type. And I also have a mammal table, which has an animal ID. So we're going to join on the animal ID. So where those are the same, it's going to grab those two tables together. And where the animal type in table A, this is the table alias, I'll talk about that in just a moment, where this animal type is mammal. And so the animal type is here. We've defined that to be mammal and reptile, I believe. So we do that here. So what I've done here is I'm selecting star, which means give me everything from this database, this table. I'm making an alias for this table, calling it A, short for animal. I also want to pull everything from class demos database from the mammal table, aliasing that to M, where the animal ID and A, where the animal table is the same as the animal ID and M, which is the mammal table. And I want where the animal type in A is equal to mammal. So that's what this statement is doing. Execute it. And so now I'm getting everything from those tables. You'll see animal ID is in here twice. That's because I'm pulling the animal ID from animal, also pulling the animal ID from mammal. It's kind of redundant, and we'll see how to resolve that here in just a moment. I've got the name, got the type, the species, and the animal environment ID. What I've done up here is I've actually joined on the environment ID as well. So here we've got animal ID equals animal ID, the two tables, so we're good. Animal type is mammal. You'll see that I've also, in the from clause, actually I can bring that down a little bit to read. So I've got animal A, mammal M, and environment E. I've got an additional add to my where clause where the environment ID in mammal is equal to the environment ID in environment. And I run this, I will get an error. And that is because, and let me copy that response so we can see that a little bit better. All right. So you see how it's saying that animal ID is ambiguous because we've got animal ID and A. We also have animal ID and M. And it doesn't know which one we want to grab, even though they're the same, so it shouldn't really matter. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and put a dot. So what we're doing here is we're using that alias again. So we're now telling SQL, I want the animal ID from the animal table. So now when I run this, we get our results back. You notice that we don't have the animal ID in there twice now. And we also have the environment ID. We also notice that we had a join on environment ID, but we didn't have that as part of the results that we cared about. So you can do that as well. All right, got all columns here. We get only specific columns here, so we can run that one. You can see what that one looks like. Again, similar idea of what we've got there. Also have the regrow appendage field is there. If I want to get all the columns for reptile, I can do this. And you'll see since we're using that star, we got some repeated animal IDs. We got an environment ID in there as well. So a little bit of duplication. Here's some other useful queries that you may find. Really, what's nice is you have this schema browser over here that lets you see your tables and the columns inside of them as well. Anyway, I just want to give you a quick demo of the of SQL, how to create a schema, create the tables, create those relationships, and then put data into them. So I'll be posting this video and the SQL file on Blackboard a little bit later. Thank you. Have a great day.